So what is this SDLC? What is the Software Development Lifecycle? So it is a framework that describes the activities that need to be performed at each stage of a software development project. So as we discussed with an example of manufacturing the product called as the water bottle. So what are the different steps or the different stages involved in developing the product? Similarly for this software project, so we are going to have the different stages in order to develop the software project. So the different stages are planning and requirement analysis, defining the requirements, and designing the product architecture, and building or developing the product. And then after developing the product, we need to test, and after completing the testing phase, we need to deploy in market, and we need to check for the maintenance. So these are the 6 different stages involved in the software development. So you can conclude them as the different phases. Like the first one is the analyze phase, where we will be having the initial assessment and feasibility study, and then the design phase, where we will be having the user requirements and existing system evaluation and logical system design. Whereas when it comes to the development phase, we will be having the detailed system specification. When it comes to the testing phase, we are going to write the code, and we are going to test the application for the code what we have written, and then we need to debug. And finally, in the finalizer stage, we are going to evaluate and do maintenance, and then any enhancements or changes provided on the requirements. So this is in detail of what we are going to do at each phase of each stage present in the SDLC process. So all you will get a better understanding of this diagram when we are going to complete the software methodologies or else the SDLC process. So what are the different approaches you are having in the software methodologies? So in software development lifecycle methodology, we will be having the waterfall model, which is a linear framework, and then the incremental model, which is the combination of both linear and iterative framework. Whereas the spiral model is a combination of both the linear and iterative framework. And prototyping is an iterative framework model, and then the rapid application development RAD is also an iterative framework model. So all these software methodologies, we are going to call them as the traditional approaches. So what is the difference between the linear and the iterative framework? So linear in the sense of the process happens in the form of a sequential steps, that is, after completing the analysis part, then only we are supposed to enter into the design phase. After completing the all the requirements present in the design phase, then only we are supposed to enter into the development phase. So like this, the process happens in the form of a sequential steps. That's what this type of process we are going to call it as the linear. Whereas an iterative model. So iterative model is, here we are going to have the development of the project will be in the form of iterations. Yeah, we are going to accept the changes, we are going to accept the new enhancements related to the requirements in the form of iterations. So among these linear and iterative frameworks, the waterfall model is the best example or the best model of using this linear framework process. So all these waterfall, incremental, the spiral, the prototyping and the RAD are going to be called as the traditional approaches. And now, and the other important software methodology is the Agile methodology, which is one of the most important, and many of the companies, many of the current IT companies are using this Agile methodology as software methodologies to implement the project. So the methods that support the Agile methodology are, the Scrum is one of the methods, and then the extreme programming is one of the methods, and then the adaptive software development is one of the methods, and then the dynamic system development method, which we are going to be called as the DSDM. So these are the different methods that support the Agile methodology.
So what are these called?
These Scrum and extreme programming and ASD and DSDM are the methods that support the Agile methodology.
Okay.
Whereas these the traditional approaches, the first column one will be the different models, different software models. So among them, Agile methodology is also one of the software methodology, but as it is having very high importance in the current development of the projects, of the IT projects. So we are going to discuss this in a new chapter.
So what is iterative framework?
Iterative framework is nothing but we are going to accept the requirements what the client has been providing on the development of the project in the form of iterations. Say in the iteration 1, you are going to develop the few requirements. You are going to work on the few requirements, and you will complete the analysis part of the requirements, and then you will enter into the design phase of the requirements, and you will document the requirements, and these documents will be forwarded to the client. And once if the client is okay, if the client is approved, then we are going to start the development process. And if you are having any changes related to the requirements, we are going to accept the changes in the form of iterations. That is, iteration 2, we are going to implement the new changes provided by the client. And in iteration 3, we are going to accept the change modifications or else the change requirements specified by the client. But when it comes to the linear framework, we don't have the process of waiting for the client requirement to get the changes or else to get the new enhancements. So you are supposed to move from one phase to the another phase until and unless you are going to complete all the phases present in the development of the project. Study what are the requirements we are having from the client. We need to complete the analysis part of the requirements. That is, we need to analyze all the requirements. So then only we are supposed to enter into the design phase of the requirements. In the design phase, we are going to design all the requirements specified by the client. Once if you complete this phase, then only you are supposed to enter into the development phase. In the development phase also, you need to complete the development of all the requirements. And when it comes to the iterative model, so we are not supposed to wait until all the requirements need to be freeze, as we are going to have the process in the form of iterations. So we are going to accept the changes in the form of the iterations.
So iteration means making the changes as per required by the client.
Exactly. I will explain you in the next slide with the diagrammatical representation so that you can get the better understanding of the difference between the linear and the iterative frameworks.
Okay, so what is the difference between agile and iterative framework?
You know, Agile is also one of the methodology which is following the iterative framework.
Okay.
Just the reason behind the separating this Agile methodology as the next point is due to its importance. And this all the first section is going to represent all the traditional models, and whereas this Agile methodology is the recent and the latest model used for the development of the software project.
Okay. And can you mix different kind of model? Like,
Yeah, we are
can you
going
mix linear and
to see in detail about what is the waterfall model, and then what is the process involved in it, and when we are going to use this waterfall model, and then what are the advantages and disadvantages. So like this we are going to
okay.
see each and every model, and after completing these traditional models, then we are going to enter into the Agile methodology.
Okay.
So let's see about the first one is the waterfall model, where we will be having the different phases, the requirements, the design, the implementation, test, installation, and maintenance. So in requirements, we will define the needed information, the function, the behavior, the performance, and then the interfaces. When it comes to the design phase, here we need to design these architectures. So what type of architecture does the client business is going to suit based on the requirements specified by him. Coming to architecture, what is the software architecture? So we will be having different types of architecture in the IT project. Say it is the two-tier architecture, the three-tier architecture, and then the MVC model. So these are the different software architectures. So usually the solution architects or else the system analysts are going to work on this architecture part. And when it comes to the implementation phase, we will be having the source code, the database, and then the user administration, user documentation, and testing. So this diagram is going to explain the process flow of the waterfall model. So the different phases involved in the waterfall methodology is the concept phase, where we are going to define the scope of the project and the need, the purpose of the project, and then we will be having the requirements. So where we are going to maintain the document with all the requirements specified by the client, and then we will be having the two design phases. The first one is the high level design phase, and then the next one is the excuse me, and the next one is the detailed design phase. So in high level design phase, we are going to discuss about the business requirements. So business requirements in the sense of what are the business rules that need to be followed for the client, and then what is the business process, what is his business process, so how the business process is going to work. And in detailed design phase, we are going to explain the functionality of the client business, means how the client business is going to function, or else the business rules what we have mentioned in the company, in his company, how they are going to work. And then the SRS document, that is a software requirement specification document, where we are going to have a detailed description of each and every requirement provided by the client. So the business requirements will come into the high level design document, and then the FRD and the SRS will come into the detailed design document. So after preparing the high level and the detailed design phase documents, we are going to start over the implementation of the project, where we are going to write the programmatical code required to implement the requirements. Excuse me. And then the testing phase. In the testing phase, we are going to test the records, means how the development process, means how the developer or the programmer has written the code, the programmatical code to develop the requirements. So that that requirements need to be tested. So whether they are performing, how they are going to performing, and then whether they are giving the right functionality, and whether they are they can able to produce the expected output. So all these concerns will be done in the testing phase. So if you see this diagram here, we will be having the two arrows. The first one is initially started from the, which will be acting as a transition to next phase, and the next arrow, the thin arrow, which will be acting as a feedback to the earlier phase. And then these are the some of the advantages of the waterfall model, as it is easy to understand and easy to use, because the process is explained clearly without having any specifications, or without having any particular process, rules and regulations that need to follow the different phases. And it also provides the structure to the inexperienced staff, because to perform this software waterfall development model, the users are not supposed to have any project experience or any practical experience, because they can easily understand what is happening at each process, means at each phase of the development process using the waterfall methodology. And the milestones are well understood, and we have the sets requirement stability, and which is also good for the management control, for planning the staffing, and then for tracking the development of the project. and it works well when the quality is more important than cost or schedule. So remember the point over there. This model is going to work well when the customer or the client is not focused about the cost and schedule. Then what are the disadvantages or the deficiencies of the waterfall model? Or all the requirements must be known upfront. That is, you need to get the total requirements related to the development of the project from the client at the initial phase, means at the start of the project. Means you need to complete the requirements phase. Means all the requirements should be known upfront, and deliverables created for each phase or considered project. Means what are the deliverables we are going to release in, we are going to deliver in each phase will be considered as the fixed thing. Means we are not going to accept the changes or modifications until we complete all the phases present in the development process, and can give a false impression of progress. So, for example, if we are discussing about the requirements in the requirement phase from the client, so the client is giving the requirements of the project. So as this waterfall model suggests that we are not supposed to move into the next process until all the requirements need to be known upfront. Means we need to complete the total requirements related to develop the project. Then only we are supposed to enter into the next phase. So now when the user when the client or the customer they check the status of the project. So the project is already started 2 months or the 3 months before, and still we are at the requirements phase. That is, we are collecting all the requirements. So working on the total requirements which should be discussed and which should be updated in front of the project. I mean the upfront of the phase. So when we are going to use the waterfall model, so the first thing is that all the requirements are very well known, and the product definition is stable, and the technology is understood, and we have the process, I mean the revision of changing the new version with an existing product. And then porting an existing product to a new platform. So these are the different concerns or different scenarios where we are going to use the waterfall model. Excuse me. So are you clear about this, the waterfall model? So what are the strengths and what is the waterfall model process flow, and then what are the disadvantages, and then when we are going to use this waterfall model. And then the next model, the software methodology we are going to discuss is the V model. So as this V model is also the similar process of the waterfall. So that's why it's called as a variant of the waterfall, which we will be having the verification and validation of the product. So the V stands for the verification and validation of the product. That means the testing of the product is planned in parallel with the corresponding phase of the development. So what are the things you are going to develop related to the requirements? So this should be verified and validated. That is, during the phase of the development only, we are performing the testing phase. Means you are not supposed to do the testing process, the testing phase separately for this model. So the different steps involved in this V model are the project and requirements planning, where we will be having the total the requirements related to the project, and then what are the resources, how many number of resources we are required, and then the product requirements and specification analysis, which we are going to have the complete specification of the software system, and the architecture of high level design, which defines how the software functions will fulfill the design, and in detailed design we will be having the how to develop the algorithms for each architectural component. And then the coding phase, where we are going to transform the algorithms into a software, and the unit testing, which we are going to check each module whether the module on which purpose we are going we have developed this particular module, does it going to work on the specifications mentioned by the for the requirements. And then the integration and testing, which we are going to check that modules interconnect correctly, and system and acceptance testing, where we are going to check the entire software system in its environment. And finally the production operation and maintenance, which will provide for the enhancements and corrections. So the different phases like the unit testing, integration and testing, and system acceptance and testing are the different types of testing process. We will discuss in detail about this unit testing and the integration and the testing and the system and acceptance testing when we move into the chapter called as the testing concepts. So this is the process flow of the P model. So if you check the diagram, so the process happens in the form of a V model. It starts with the first phase is the project starts, where we will be having the requirements phase, and then the architectural design phase, and then the detailed design phase. Then we are going to implement or develop the programmatical code, and then we are going to have the unit test phase. So unit test phase is done based on the design specification what we have mentioned in the detailed design phase. And then after completing the unit test phase, we are going to check over the integration test phase. So this integration test phase need to be verified with what type of architecture does the software is going to work. That is, this integration test phase is performed based on the functional specification. And after completing the integration test phase, so the system test phase is going to work on the requirements specified by the client. So if you see that in each and every process, so every process is verified and then it is validated. And also if you check the different stages in this V model. So we don't have the testing phase separately, because as we are performing the verification and validation of each and every process, we don't need to have the separate flow for the separate process for the testing phase. So let us see the advantages, means the deficiencies and the strengths of this V model. So the strengths of the V model is we are going to emphasize the planning for verification and validation of the product in the earlier stage of the product development. So this helps us if we are having any issues or else any problems or else any um, any changes in the functionality of the requirements, we can able to come up in the earlier stage of the product development. And each deliverable must be testable, and where we have the project management can track the progress with the milestones set for the development of the project in related to the different phases. And it is easy to use because each and every phase after completing each every phase, we are going to verify and validate. So once if you done the verify and validation process, so we are not supposed to think more about how this product is going to work. But because we have completed the verification and validation process at each phase of the process so involved in the V model. And then what are the weaknesses or the disadvantages of this V-shape is it does not handle the concurrent events. Concurrent events in the sense of if we are able to work on the two different phases. That is, say for example, if you have any changes in the or the new any new enhancements related to the requirements, so the same will be uh, verified. Means after considering the changes and the new enhancements, those changes and enhancements need to be verified and validated before moving into the next phase. So until and unless if you if you need if you have updated the changes and the requirements, so then only we can work on the programmatical on the implementation part. That is, we are not supposed to work on two concurrent events, and it doesn't have the iterations of phases, so which is one of the major disadvantage of this V-shaped model, and it doesn't easily handle the dynamic changes in the requirements, and it doesn't contain the risk analysis activities. And when we are going to use this V-shaped model, so the first thing is when we have the excellent choice for systems requiring the high reliability, and when we have all the requirements are known upfront similar to the waterfall model, and then it can be modified to handle the changing requirements beyond the analysis phase. And once if you are clear or if you have any space well understanding of the solution, the technology which we are going to use for the project. So these are the different scenarios, the different cases when we are going to use this V-shaped model. So till now we discussed about the waterfall model and then the V model. What is the process involved in the waterfall model and what is the process involved in the process flow in the V-shape the model, and the advantages and disadvantages of each model, and then when we are going to use this particular software methodology. So now we are going to work on the another model called as the spiral model. So the name itself indicates that the process happens in the form of a spiral structure where we will be having the different quadrants, means these four quadrants or the different phases. In each quadrant we will be having the different phases, and these four quadrants all will be the process flow of the spiral model. So in the quadrant 1 we are going to determine the objectives and the alternatives and then the constraints. In the quadrant 2 we are going to evaluate the alternatives and how we are going to identify the alternatives and how we are going to resolve the risk. Whereas in the next quadrant we are going to work on the next level product. We are going to work on the plan the next level phases, and then we need to develop the next level product. So if you see the diagram out there, see in the first quadrant, here we are defined with the concept, and then if you move into the second quadrant, so we are going to work on the requirements, and then in the third quadrant we are going to work on the design, and then in the fourth quadrant we are going to work on the implement. So let us see in detail about the different quadrants involved in the spiral model. So in the spiral quadrant 1, we are going to determine the objectives, alternatives and constraints. So what are the objectives? Objectives will be the functionality, the performance, and then the hardware and software interfaces, and then what are the critical success factors. And the alternatives will be the build, the reuse, and then the buy, the subcontract, and etc. So all this information related to the alternatives means what is meant by the build, the reuse, then the subcontract. In the next chapter about the documents required for a BA to the development of the project. So before the development means if it is an existing product, then we need to have the different documents. So like we will be having the request for proposal, and then the contracts model, and then the SLAs, meaning the service level agreement. So all these are the different documents related to the project. And coming to the constraints will be the cost, the schedule, and then the interface. So these are the activities which we are going to work on the quadrant 1. And coming to the quadrant 2, we are going to evaluate the alternatives and identify and resolve all the risks. So studying the alternatives means study alternatives which will help us through objectives and the constraints, and identifying the risks means what will be the lack of experience and what type of risk we are able to face when we implement the new technology, and then if we have any tight schedules in the development process, so what type of risks we are going to we are going to handle. So all these constraints will become under the identify risk. Whereas in the resolve risk, so it evaluates if money could be lost by continuing system development. Let's see what are the types of risks, or what are the different constraints in which lead to the or which we can consider as the different risk phases risks involved in the different phases. So how we are going to resolve that risk? By evaluating how the money could not be lost by continuing system development. And in the next quadrant, that is in the quadrant 3, we are going to work on the develop next level product. Means the typical activities involved in the quadrant 3 is creating a design, reviewing a design, developing the code and inspecting the code and then testing the product. When it comes to the final phase, the fourth quadrant, that is the plan next phase. The typical activities involved in this phase are how to develop the project plan and how to develop the configuration management plan. Excuse me. And then how to develop a test plan and installation plan. So all these activities means it's mainly focused on the planning process of the project. Means it consists of the project planning and then the configuration management plan and then the test plan and then the installation plan. And these are the strengths or the advantages of the spiral model, as it provides the earlier indication of insurmountable risks without much cost, and the users see the system earlier because of the rapid prototyping tools, and as we'll be having the critical high risk fractions which are developed first, and the design does not have to be perfect, where the users can be closely tied to all the lifecycle steps and because of the early and frequent feedback from the users. So all this will be considered as the advantages of using this spiral model. Then coming to what are the disadvantages or the weaknesses of this spiral model. So the time spent for evaluating the risks will be too large for small or low risk projects. So as you are focusing more in identifying the risk and then resolving the risk. So the time spent on performing these two issues will be and the time spent planning, the resetting objectives and the doing risk analysis and prototyping will also be an aggressive part of the development process of the project. And as the model is a complex where we are mostly focused on the risk, and the developers must be reassigned during the non-development phase activities, and it's also hard to define the objectives and verify milestones that indicate what we are going to proceed to the next iteration process. And when we are going to use the spiral model, when we have the creation of a prototype is appropriate, and when the cost and risk evaluation is important, and when we are having the medium to high risk projects, and then the long-term project commitment, and why because of the potential changes to economic priorities, and the users are the unsure of their needs, and once the requirements are complex, and if you have any new product line and any significant changes or express or expected related to the research and exploration. So all these are the different concerns of the different cases when we are going to use this spiral model.
What kind of interview questions are expected from these kind of models?
Um, it mainly focuses on the process flow. The first thing is the about the process flow, and then um, what are the advantages of the each model, and then the next thing is the differences between, means what is the difference between the waterfall and the spiral model. Others, what is the difference between the waterfall and the V model. Or else you can see also get the disadvantages. What are the disadvantages of the spiral model? And when we are supposed to use the V model, means what are the different yeah, the scenarios, the cases that supports the V model. So these are the types of questions which we can expect from the interviewer on these models, on the software methodology. Anyway,
And does a company strictly follow the spiral model or T or a waterfall model, or uses a combination?
it depends upon the type of the project. Means usually earlier before like 20 or 30 years before for the projects, for the development of the project, so they usually follow the waterfall model. Means the companies, each and every company will be fixed with the different methodologies, the different software methodologies for the development of the product. So few companies are fixed with the waterfall, or else the spiral, and then few companies are focused on the V model, or else on the few companies are focused on the prototype and RAD models. And it also depends upon the type of the project on which we are going to develop. And in some cases, even if the client or the customer is also having any knowledge on the software methodology. So if you have any specification, a particular specification mentioned by the client that uh, he is asking us to develop the project in the waterfall or else in the spiral or else any agile methodologies. So this will be done. This case will be considered if the client or the customer is having any software knowledge or else any uh, information on the software methodologies. If you know the process of the different models like the waterfall, the rapid, and the spiral. So he may specify that you need to use this software methodology for the development process of the product.
Yeah.
Anyway, after completing the sessions, I'll be forwarding the expected interviewer questions. Means what type of questions we are going to expect from the interviewer on the different concepts.
Okay, so that will be like based on India as well as US market, right?
Yeah, even for it's also not completely about the area or the specific country. You can mainly focus on the type of project. Say if it is a large scale project, then the waterfall model is the best approach. And then if it is related to the project, means if the client business is related to the something like financial transactions. So where there is a chance of getting the possible number of risks. So in that scenario, we are going to propose for the spiral model, because as in the spiral model, the main theme is we are going to spend more time in identifying and resolving the risks of the project.
So is it like in healthcare there is a particular dominant model being followed, and in finance there is some other dominant model being followed?
No, no, no. Yeah, not only for the healthcare, for any type of the domain. So whether it may be the insurance domain, or whether it may be the finance domain, or whether it may be a manufacturing domain. So we don't have any specific model.
Okay.
And even one more thing is, you are not supposed to put more concentration on this the traditional approaches, means the waterfall, the spiral, and then the V model, and the prototype, and the RAD model. We need to just understand the process flow, and then what are the advantages and disadvantages, and when we are going to use.
Okay.
Because as most of the companies are focusing on the agile development process, agile methodology. So you need to have the good knowledge on what is agile methodology, and then what is the process involved in it, and then what are the different methods. What are the different methods that support the agile methodology? So you need to have the clear understanding on the current working process, means the methodology which is currently using by the IT companies. Because even the interviewer also put the more questions on the present working tool, not for the already the previous the old version the models.
Okay.
And coming to the next one is the prototype model. So in this, the main theme of the prototype model is, instead of freezing the requirements before a design or coding can proceed, we are having a prototype is built to understand the requirements. So the prototype is developed based on the currently known requirements, and with the help of this prototype, the client can get an actual feel of the system. So how the interactions with the prototype can enable the client to have the better understand the requirements of the desired system. So the basic theme, the main theme of the prototype model is, the basic idea here is that instead of freezing the requirements before a design or coding can proceed, we will be having a throwaway prototype which will be built to understand the requirements, and the prototype is, this particular prototype is developed based on the currently known requirements, where the client can get an actual feel of the system, and how the interactions with the prototype can enable the client to better understand that the requirements of the desired system. So let's see in detail about the prototype model. So in this process, the first stage is, we will be having the initial requirements, and we will design the requirements, and after designing the requirements we will develop a prototype, and then we will forward it to the customer. The customer will evaluate the prototype which we have forwarded, and then he will update his comments means he's going to review and update the information related to the prototype, and then if he specified any changes, in the prototype, and we need to consider those changes, and we need to again design those the changes specified by the client, and again we will be preparing a prototype, and then it will be sent to the customer for evaluation. And now if the customer is satisfied, then only we will enter into the development phase, and this process is continuous until we need to maintain we need to satisfy the customer. And what are the advantages of the prototype model is the users are actively involved in the development. Users in the sense of, we can say it as the client or else the customers and the end users who are going to work on the client location. Because as we are after designing the requirements, we are developing a prototype, and this prototype will be forwarded to the customer, and again the customer need to provide need to update if he has any changes, and we will consider those changes, and again we will design the changes, and we will prepare a prototype, and again that will be sent to the customer. And now if the customer is satisfied with the changes, with the prototype what we have developed, then you are supposed to move into the next level of the development phase. So that's the reason the users are most actively involved in the development phase. And since in this methodology, as we will be having the working model of the system is provided, the users get a better understanding of the system being developed. Means in the prototype, we are going to explain we are going to present the working model of the system, means how the model is going to work. And the errors can be detected much earlier, and we'll be having the before users feedback is available, leading to better solutions, because as we will be having the client or the customer interaction at the prototype phase, in the sending of the preparing the prototypes. And then if you're having any the missing functionality, and if you're having in the confusion of the difficult functions which can be identified, where we will be having the requirement validations of the quick implementation, and then if you have any incomplete functions, excuse me. So all this will be considered as the excuse me. So all this will be considered as the advantages of the prototype model. And coming to the disadvantages, so it leads to implementing than repairing way of building systems. Means if you check this, check the particular diagram. So let me show this. So if you check this particular diagram, so we are collecting the requirements, and then we are almost spending most of the time in this particular process, means preparing the prototype and then getting the updates on the developed prototype. And if the customer is specified, until we need this process happens until we need the customer satisfied. So in this process, if you check, we have worked on the initial requirements with a different number of cycles. So it is just like for the developer thing, even you are most focused on the how we are going to repair the way of the building systems. Practically, this methodology may increase the complexity of the system because as the scope of the system may expand before the original phase. And as it is having the incomplete application, which may also cause the application not to be used as the full system was designed based on the incomplete or the inadequate problem analysis. And then when we are going to use this prototype model, so this prototype model should be used when the desired system needs to have a lot of interaction with the end users. And typically this model will be useful for the online systems or for the web interfaces which have a very high amount of interaction with the end users. And it may take a while for a system to be built that allows the use and needs the minimal training for the end user. And the prototyping ensures that the end users constantly work with the system and provide a feedback which is incorporated in the prototype to result in a usable system. And these are excellent for designing good human-computer interface systems. So if you check the uses of this prototype model, when we are going to use this prototype model. So when you are supposed to think that this particular process, this particular development process of the project, we need to have interact with the client or with the users. Means if you need to have the maximum interaction needed for the development of the project with the end users or with the clients. So then we are going to use this prototype model. And if we consider the example as the online systems are developing any websites. So for developing a website, if you are in the developing of any website for the company, so we need to keep on update the changes or else any new designs or else any new uh, the alignments related to the font size, and then the type of font family. So everything related to the design issues you need to update to the customer, the client or the customer. So you need to keep on updating the design what you have done on the particular website. So that's why we have mentioned that this will be typically the online systems or the web interfaces which will be having a very high amount of interaction with the end users. So that in that scenario this is the best suit for a prototype model. So in today's session we discussed about the SDLC, means what is meant by the software development life cycle, and then what are the different phases involved in the SDLC, and then what are the different software methodologies, and among them we started about the traditional models, the waterfall, and then the V model, and then the spiral and prototype. So in tomorrow's session we will discuss about the RAD and Agile methodology. So what is meant by the rapid application development, and then we are going to see what is meant by the Agile methodology and what is the process involved in the development of the projects using the Agile methodology, and then what are the differences between the Agile methodology and the traditional approaches. So any issues?
So,
Yeah, 1 second.